This is Let's Get Growing with horticulturalist Nathan Wilson at Lanier Nursery and Gardens in Flowery Branch. Get information you need for gardening, landscaping, and home plant care. We're taking your calls right now at 706-865-3181 or email info@wrwh.com. Now, here's Nathan.
Good morning, gang. Welcome to the program. What a glorious and beautiful Saturday morning we have here. It's a little drizzly outside the studio. Last week, Buster and I were wearing our coats because it was a little cool. Today, we're wearing our rain jackets because we're getting a little wet behind the ears, but that's okay because, hey, in the garden, that's exactly what we want. That's exactly what we love. We love to have rain, don't we? Those times in the summer when rain doesn't seem to be coming our way, well, now we have some. So we can't complain, really. We really can't complain. So this cool weather is here. I know that in the past few weeks we've been looking for it, waiting for it, hoping that it would arrive. And now we see that it has come. And hopefully it's here to stay. The weather forecast is looking good as far as cool weather goes. You know, one thing that I'm always looking for is to follow the leaves. Follow the trees, follow the leaves. And that's very important. You know, I've said for the previous programs, I said, people have asked me, hey, where is fall? And I said, well, it's on the calendar. But you want to make sure that you're looking at the leaves, looking at the trees. Now, every year, fall color is either good or bad, right? Sometimes you have some glorious fall color, and we're going to talk about fall color a little later on in the program. But sometimes you have years that have great fall color, and it's all really weather dependent. It all depends on how much rain we get, what kind of temperatures we've had, and I don't know. This year, we're going to see. I've noticed some trees are looking pretty decent. Some other trees have just turned brown and crispy. Maybe if you have a Japanese maple, you are hoping to have some great fall color, which they do in a good year. But I've noticed that a lot of the fall maples, Japanese maples that I've seen this year, they're not really doing so well as far as the way they are getting their fall color. They're just kind of drying out. It's just really hot and dry the last little run. This morning, the question is it time to plant? Yes, fall is the best time to plant. I want to remind you that fall is the best time to plant, and here is the reasons why. You know, for so long we've always said, hey, plant in the spring, you know, it's a good time to plant. Well, it's really not the best time to plant because in springtime you have the hotter temperatures, you have less likely to have moisture, but I'm going to tell you why fall is the best time to plant. Number one, you have cooler air temperatures. Cooler air temperatures are very important to planting. When it's when the air temperature is cooler, then the plants go through less transpiration. Okay, now here's your big word of the day. Transpiration is basically like human sweating. Okay, plants, they will actually produce water and stuff. They'll pull water through the roots, through the stems, through the leaves, and then they come out these little pores, just like our sweat does on our skin, underneath the leaves. And so that is transpiration, and they're using lots of water in the summertime. They're using lots of water in the springtime when they're actually growing. And so in this case, you really don't have so much transpiration or loss of water because of the cooler air temperatures. Now, the second reason why you really need to plant in the fall is because of the warm soil temperatures. Even though the air can change from day to day, hour to hour, the warm soil temperatures is what's really important. The roots of the plant will still be able to grow, still be able to develop. And by springtime, you'll increase the size of this root system, getting ready for that cool the heat of the summer, not the cool, the heat of the summer. That's what we're going to be looking at. So the last thing is, you know, in the wintertime, the water table is a bit higher, which really means that, we have more moisture in the wintertime than we do in the summer. We've seen this summer we had a pretty dry in some areas, but then again pretty wet in some times, and that up and down is not consistent. Periods of dry, periods of wet, it's just not consistent for the plant, and it can put a little bit of stress. But in the wintertime, the moisture in the soil is still pretty high and still pretty moderate. So it's a really good situation. So again, we have cooler air temperatures, which means the plants use less water. We have warm soil temperatures, which allows the roots to grow. And number 3, we have moisture in the soil, which again helps with the plant not going under the stress that it normally does. So if you have a question this morning about planting in the fall, give me a call at 706-865-3181. Our lines are always open to you, or you can send us a message and we'll be glad to relay it over the air. Just send it to the email address here at WRWH. That is info@WRWH.com. And I want to remind you to be social with us. Be social with us because we are on Facebook this morning. Kathy Schultz is watching this morning, and she says, good morning, and I say good morning to Kathy. Thanks for joining us. Definitely go to Facebook and check out WRWH 93.9 Facebook page, and we will be glad to answer your questions there. Oh, we've got a few other people joining us. Actually, my sister is on the line, is on Facebook as well. So definitely check us out there. Now, if you're joining the program or new to the program, I want to remind you that we also bank away old shows. We put old shows on YouTube. If you go to youtube.com and search WRWH, then you will be able to watch everything, or listen rather, to everything that we have been producing all summer and fall long. All fall long. That's odd. But anyhow, also, if you're going to be traveling, especially coming up with holidays and whatnot, you want to make sure that you take WRWH with you. And thank goodness for the internet. You know, radio waves may not go all the way to Florida or Michigan from here, but if you travel to Michigan or Florida, then you can listen to WRWH and all your favorite programming on the TuneIn app. It's a free app for your smartphone. Just go wherever you buy your apps and type in TuneIn. Once you download that, you've got to search for WRWH. Make it your favorite because, like I always say, it already is your favorite. So be sure to do that this holiday season so you can keep in touch with all of the good programming that you're used to here at WRWH. Today, we've got a really big show. We are going to talk about a lot of topics, a lot of hot topics for this time of year. And I do need to mention that I want to invite you to join us next week at the same time, 9 o'clock. I won't be in the studio, but I've prepared some stories from deadly plants, creepy gardens, and how plants can actually maybe not be so nice. I think it's very timely for this time of year. Since that'll be our show before Halloween, you can join us for a little creepy session in the garden and learn about some history, how plants have attacked people or done certain things. There's no feed me Seymour necessarily, but it will be fun and exciting, and it's going to be a little something different. So be sure to join us for a Halloween special in the garden here at Let's Get Growing next week at 9 o'clock. This morning, I want to touch on a topic that some folks are probably dealing with if you are planting fruit trees. If you're planting fruit trees, or maybe you have a small orchard, I want to remind you that there are certain things you must do this time of year, especially to help prevent the presence of disease, including bacteria and fungus. You see, what happens with fruit trees, we're talking like apples, pears, plums, peaches in particular. These types of plants are definitely going to produce these beautiful fruits, but sometimes the fruits go awry. Sometimes the fruits will go astray with some disease, may overtake the fruits, and you may notice that on your trees. What you want to do this time of year is you want to remove any and all fallen fruit that is on the ground around the tree. You also want to take off any fruits that will not be harvested. Any of these, the ones on the ground or the ones that are on the plant, can lead to overwintering of bacteria and fungus. And what you'll essentially be doing if you leave the fruits is you're allowing fungus and bacteria to just create a habitat right there around the plant. And then next year you're faced with the same problems. So ideally you would remove the fruits that have fallen or fruits that are on the trees and are not going to be harvested, and you're going to burn them. You're going to take them away, you're going to put them in the burn pile, and you're going to get rid of them that way. Now, again, The goal here is to try to eliminate overwintering of fungal and bacterial diseases. In the South, gang, fruit trees are tough. Fruit trees are tough to grow. And the reason is because of our heat, because of our humidity in the summer, we are left with higher chances of bacteria and fungus to overtake. And I know that we've been talking on the air before. You can look back at some of our previous broadcasts. But what you can do is we have to maintain a kind of spray, essentially, some kind of fungicide or bactericide throughout the summer. And this time of year, what your goal is to get rid of the presence of these fungus and bacteria on the fruits for next year. If there's leaves that fall, it's a good idea to get rid of the leaves as well. That's probably one of the only cases where I would encourage you to move leaves. Most of the time, when leaves fall, you let them stay there and they go back into the soil and give you good nitrogen. At least 33% of the plant's nitrogen need goes back into the soil. But in this case, you have to forego the extra nitrogen in order to get rid of overwintering diseases. So again, that's fruit trees. If you've got a question about your fruit tree, feel free to give me a call this morning, 706-865-3181. Now, I want to mention that this week I've decided that I have found out and discovered my favorite garden tool. I have discovered my favorite gardening tool, and that gardening tool is called a fork. No, I don't mean I go out there with my silver-plated dining forks. Who am I kidding? I have aluminum forks, But I don't go out there with a dining fork. I'm talking about a garden fork. And there's a couple of different kinds. There's a few different kinds, but I'm going to talk about two of them. One of the main forks that you're probably familiar with is called a pitchfork, basically the pitchforks have these long tines. There's usually a lot of them. And it's kind of that classic American, if you're familiar with the painting American Gothic, where you have the man and woman standing there and the man's holding the pitchfork in his hand and they're looking very gloomily into the frame there. That is the pitchfork. And the pitchfork is used primarily to transfer things, to move something from one place to another. Yes, hay or straw can be moved with a pitchfork, as well as compost or mulch. If you're using mulch, I know a lot of times the temptation is to use a shovel. And maybe you're using a shovel when you're moving mulch, but you really want to use a good pitchfork, The reason it's called a pitchfork is because you pitch it. You scoop and you pitch it somewhere. You pitch the product that is in the fork somewhere. So the pitchfork is good for moving particles that have large kind of irregular shapes like straw or mulch or compost, like I've already mentioned. Now, the other type of fork is called a digging fork, okay? A digging fork or a spade fork is one that you're going to use to push into the ground. A spade fork is going to have probably less number of tines, maybe, but they're definitely going to be wider. They're going to be maybe up to an inch wide, and they're going to be stronger than the pitchfork's tines. And the idea is that you can push with your foot. You can push the fork down into the ground, and you can lift the soil. You can soften the soil. You can mix soil with the pitchfork. As a matter of fact, I think that the spade forks are going to do you a better job, less effort in mixing soil, especially if you're building a perennial or annual bed and you're adding compost and whatnot. Mixing that together with a spade fork or digging fork is going to give you better results than even using a shovel, maybe. Because of the tine action that you get there, you can kind of mix and till in that respect. So again, my favorite gardening tool is going to be the fork. Forks of all different kinds. There's another one called broad fork, which we don't really have time to talk about. But the main two forks that I can see you using would be a transferring action from a pitchfork and a digging action with a spade fork. Those two are going to give you some good results. When you start moving mulch this fall, if you start mulching, we're going to talk about mulch later in the show, but you start moving mulch and you're using a shovel, just realize that is not really the best or most efficient way. Try to use a pitchfork and get that stuff spread. Folks, I want to say hello to a few folks. Matt Jarrett and Nancy Clendenin are watching on Facebook. I want you to make sure that you go to Facebook and search WRWH and be sure to like that page. because you already like WRWH so much. Hey, hang on tight because we're going to talk about bulbs, spring bulbs, and how you need to be dealing with those just in a few moments.
For live editions of Let's Get Growing, tune in Saturday mornings at 9 here on WRWH.
Back to more Let's Get Growing with Nathan Wilson.
Welcome back, folks. We do want to welcome Jerry and Melinda and Kelly. These folks are all joining us on Facebook Live. Feel free, if you have your smartphone or computer, you can track what we're doing on Facebook Live and just search WRWH. We do have a question from Matt. He says, how can you dry out a hanging basket that's gotten too much water? Good question, Matt. So sometimes containerized plants in general are tough. And you can ask me about it because that's what we do at Lanier Nursery and Gardens. All of our plants are in containers. We don't plant them in the ground. We plant them in containers so you can come and purchase them. But there is a balance between underwatering and overwatering. And overwatering is a big problem for many containers. Now, with hanging baskets in particular, especially if they're on a front porch where they may not get as much sun, they may not naturally be drying out. The first step you want to take, Matt, is definitely monitor the water before you water, okay? The temptation is to say, I need to water these, and sometimes we water every day, and that's maybe too much, especially a hanging basket under a porch. So be sure to monitor the moisture in the container before you water. Monitor before you water. And then what you want to do is, if it's really saturated, you may have to take it off of its hook from under the porch and put it in a little sunnier situation. Put it on the side of the porch, at the foot of the steps, or wherever, and let it sit there for a couple of days, and you should start to see the plant drying out, as long as you're not giving it an extra boost. Here would be the goal, Matt, would be to just take your finger and stick it down in the container, and if it's still moist, then you're okay. If it's kind of dry, you may need water. But what I want you to do is, while the plant is hanging, hold the bottom of it and lift up from the bottom. Lift up from the bottom and feel how heavy it is. Let me tell you, folks, that's how we do in the nursery. If something needs water, it's going to feel very light, okay? And then once you water it, I want you to feel how it feels, and you'll see how heavy it feels. If it's heavy like that, you're fine on the water. Because just because the top is dry, and even though I do recommend you to stick your finger in the top, even though the top is dry, you still may have moisture in the bottom, which the plant's roots could definitely use. And that's where overwatering can happen, is trying to give the plant too much water. So I hope that helps, Matt. Those are a few tips on drying out a hanging basket that's gotten too wet. Too wet can be a problem. It can lead to root rot, and you'll see a decline. I do want to remind you that overwatering a plant will give you a wilt, just like underwatering. If something is too dry, it'll wilt. If something is too wet, it'll wilt. It's all about the roots being restricted. For some reason, whether it's wet or dry, the roots are being restricted and the plant wilts. Our first instinct when a plant wilts is to water it. And that is, like I mentioned maybe last week or the week before, is the number one killer of all houseplants. Overwatering is the number one killer of all houseplants. So, Matt, thanks for your question. If you got a question, feel free to, Matt says thanks. He's going to forward that information to his wife. So that's really good. Hey, welcome to the show, Brandon. I know you're joining us out there. Be sure to follow us on Facebook if you haven't already. Just like I promised here, we're going to talk about bulbs. Bulbs are an important aspect of the garden. Bulbs, of course, are available right now. You can find them anywhere where bulbs are sold. At the nursery, we haven't gotten into bulbs yet. We mainly focus on plants that are already rooted and shooted. But bulbs, of course, are a storage unit. Bulbs are a storage unit for the plant, and it's a group of plants, of course, that they all summer long are growing with foliage. They're storing nutrition in the bulb and then in the roots. And then at the end of the year, even though the leaves die back, the plant is still there. It's still nice and contained, and it's a way for the plant to make it through the winter or even multiple years if something were to happen and it couldn't regrow. So this is bulb planting time for sure, especially for spring bulbs. Now, we're not talking summer blooming bulbs, but spring bulbs. What am I talking about when I talk about spring bulbs? I'm talking about some of your favorites. Some of your favorites like tulips and daffodils, or hyacinths and crocus. All of those types of plants, beautiful plants, they can be planted now. get your hands on some and plant them. But now that you've found them, that may be the easier part. How do you plant them? Well, here are my 3 tips for planting spring bulbs. Number 1, you want to soften the soil as much as possible. If you're going to be planting these in a bed, make sure to use one of those spade forks, those digging forks that I was talking about, and till the soil up really nice. Make it nice and fluffy. Ideally, you would not have any clods of soil bigger than 1 inch. Now, if you want to, you can go in a number 2, you can incorporate some organic matter. Because these are bulbs and they're more herbaceous perennials, they're not trees and shrubs, you can go ahead and add some compost. Go ahead and add some soil conditioner, and you can enrich the soil that way for these bulbs. Number 3, you're going to actually plant the bulbs into the ground. Now, here is the general rule. You want to measure the width of the bulb. Say the bulb is 2 inches wide. That's a pretty thick bulb. Pretty nice. If you had a 2-inch wide bulb, that's a nice thick bulb. And you want to plant it 2 to 3 times as deep as that width. So again, if you have a 2-inch bulb, you're going to plant it 4 to 6 inches deep. If you have a 1-inch bulb, you're going to plant it 2 to 3 inches deep. So it's all based on the width of the plant. Just do it 2 to 3 times as wide as the bulb is. Now, Kim is asking a question on Facebook Live. I'm glad she's asking this question because I'm just about to talk about dividing overcrowded bulbs. Kim's question is this the right time to move spring bulbs to a different location? Kim, it is the right time. It's the best time. It's the right time because if you wait too late and do it in the spring, well, the bulb is already activated. It's growing. It's establishing itself, and there's a chance you may do some damage. So now that they're dormant and you can still find where they are because the leaves are probably still up or at least kind of dry and laid over on the ground, you can divide bulbs or transfer bulbs as necessary. Now, here's how you want to do that. With dividing and moving bulbs to another location, you want to soften the area, wherever your bulbs are, soften the area as much as possible. Get the soil really soft again, just like when you were planting the bulbs. You want to soften the soil, break it up so that you can actually access the bulbs and you can find them. Then what you want to do is you want to separate the bulbs, the bulblets, from their mother plants, and you want to replant them at that point. You want to plant them the same way I just mentioned, 2 to 3 times as deep, but you can put them in the same bed. You can take some out and put them in another bed, whatever your heart's desire, but you definitely want to remove the mother plant, the daughter plants, the baby plants from their mother. And so this is the funny thing I want to tell you, talking about separating mother plants, daughter plants from their mothers. I give presentations to kids groups in schools and whatnot, or garden clubs, junior master gardeners. And when I give a presentation about what we do in the nursery, I say, well, what we do is we make more plants, and here's what we do. I say, you see this little plant here off to the big side of the big plant? I said the big plant is called the mother plant, and the little plant is called the baby plant or the daughter plant. And I say, and what I do in the nursery is we rip the babies away from their moms and put them in their own pots, and all the kids, oh no, that's terrible, that is horrible. Oh. And then I say, but it's okay because in 2 to 3 years maybe that baby plant will become a new plant just like the mother. So we go to the phone lines today, and Linda has a question about squirrels. Hey, Linda, how are you?
I'm great, Nathan. How are you?
Wonderful. Thanks for calling. What can we help you with?
How do I keep squirrels from digging up my bulbs that I plant?
Good question. That is a tough one to accomplish, and there's a few things that we can attempt to do. First of all, there is a product that is made from castor oil that may be effective on squirrels. It's really touted more for moles and things that kind of burrow. It's called Mole Max. We have it at the nursery. It's listed for several of the rodent type pests that we have. And then some other things you might be able to do is actually use some other repellents that are based on smell or scent. That we have a Repels All product that is a granular, and you can shake it onto the ground, and it just smells terrible. It'll keep away most of your mammals that come around. And my aunt actually was asking the same question, and she discovered, because there was some squirrels that were digging in her containers that she had just planted with pansies and whatnot that she got from the nursery, and she discovered that you could use skewers and kind of pops some skewers up. Now, obviously, you don't want that, could be dangerous to you as well, so be careful. But you could put the sharp end pointed up and keep them out that way. Now, that was in a container. It may work in the ground. Another product that you could possibly use is called Permatil. And we do sell that at the nursery. Permatil is a great product in that you can incorporate it into the soil. What Permatil is it's a expanded rock. It's a shell that they heat at like volcanic temperatures. They blow it up like popcorn, and you put it in the ground, and it's not good for them to dig through. They don't really like that those large kind of sharp particles of rock. So those are a few things you can try. When we deal with mammal pest, I should say, my recommendation is to always try multiple things. Not just use one thing, but try to do a few of those things. Some chemical barrier and also some, not chemical barrier, but maybe some repellent barrier, but also some physical barrier, like the skewers. Another one that just came to mind is what we call a web of confusion. And the web of confusion is where you may take your little skewers and pop them in, and then around the skewers, you may add some fishing line and make this web. And then when the squirrels get in there, they really don't know what that is. They're not going to really want to be near or all tangled up in that web of fishing line. So maybe those are a few tips you could try. I will say that mammal pests are some of the hardest ones to get rid of. Of course, the alternative is lead poisoning, but we don't want to go there on this show. So hope that helps, Linda.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks for calling. Thanks for listening. We do appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Absolutely. Well, if you have a question, folks, feel free to call in 706-865-3181, and we'll be right back to talk more a little bit about warm season grasses and how long do I have to mow? How much longer till we mow? We'll be right back, folks.
For live editions of Let's Get Growing, tune in Saturday mornings at 9 here on WRWH.
More great information coming your way on Let's Get Growing with Nathan Wilson.
All right, folks, we just had a great segment there. We appreciate Linda's call. She was talking about trying to get rid of squirrels in the landscape. Now, so the reality of things here is that she's on Facebook with us, and she is going to try some baby powder. Linda, definitely call us in. Call back sometime soon and let us know how that works. Like I mentioned, there is a big ordeal with mammals. Mammals are tough. But folks, we have some folks join us on Facebook with some questions, and you can do that as well. Just go to WRWH online on Facebook.com. People are asking about when is the best time to mow. When is the best time to mow? And it's a really good thing, because now that the temperatures are cooling down, I want us to talk a little bit about our weather walrus, WRWH's very own weather reporter, Bill Kinsland. He gave us some information here. He said that our earliest date of our first freezing temperature was on the 21st in 2007, and that was in Helen. And the latest first freeze date was November 20th, 2016, at the Saltee Weather Station. Now, the average first freeze date is October 25th. October 25th. And according to the current 7-day weather service forecast for White County, there is an outside chance of a brief dip into frost territory late Sunday night or early Monday morning. So keep an eye on your pumpkin patch. Now, I read that a little too early because there is an old poem from James Whitcomb Riley that says, "When the frost is on the pumpkin and the fodder's in the shock." That's the opening line of Mr. Riley's 1880s poem, and it brings up the question on everybody's mind: when will we see the first frost this season in White County? So we don't have a crystal ball for all of that. We don't have a crystal ball for all of that, but it does give us the answer, and we appreciate Mr. Bill Kinsland and the weather walrus there. So that's what's exciting. So, folks, I want to go ahead and mention here that we've got a guest on the program, my former boss, Mr. Commissioner of Agriculture, Gary Black. I've asked him to come on and talk a little bit about the stuff that we've seen down on the news, of course, in South Georgia and in agriculture. And so, Commissioner, how are you this morning, sir?
Great, Nathan. Thanks for having us. Hope you all are well.
Yeah, we really are. I know that we have been seeing images. We've been seeing video, of course, a visit by President Trump to the South Georgia and Middle Georgia. And I thought maybe you could relay some of the firsthand experiences that you're dealing with right now.
Well, thank you, Nathan. I just ask all your listeners to first keep all our Southwest Georgia folks in the farm families and rural communities that are in the storm zone. It's very wide, it's very long, and that's often when we look at one picture, we think of it being isolated. And
right.
If I could say one thing to our listeners, that the breadth of the storm and damage is in many places 100 miles wide. And the effects of the storm are going to be felt all the way from the corner in Donaldsonville and Seminole County, as far north as northeast to Johnson County and Wrightsville. We have enormous catastrophic damage to agriculture, both from normal row crops, but the generational effects that Michael will have on pecan production are things that I'm not sure everyone fully grasps yet. I'm not sure I do, but we've been in the middle of it. Our team's been working the State Operations Center since when it was opened Tuesday a week ago. But I was there to watch this Category 4 storm hit, and then not lose much power by the time it got to Georgia, and to watch that entire event, and then be with our farm families all week, again with the president, with the vice president. It's very sobering and humbling, but we have a lot of work to do. But we do have a resilient people, and with the Lord's help, we'll rebuild.
Yeah, absolutely. Commissioner, I saw an image of Greg Mims and you in a field, and behind you was a twisted, gnarly-looking building that was made of steel, I assume, but it was all just a wad of paper. I mean, as much rain as fell in the hurricane, I mean, there's really tears that are falling. Is that right?
Yeah. We're very fortunate. And of course, the coastal plain, that part of the state is very resilient when it comes to being able to handle water. I really don't think we're going to have any too much, or not going to have much ongoing, like flooding type that much water. There are parts of the state that actually need 3 or 4, 5 inches that they can, and the land can handle that pretty quickly, But the wind, where we were standing at Greg's, the image you're talking about. Mm-hmm. He recorded 119 mile an hour winds there. Wow. And they were sustained. Where Greg's farm is in Seminole County, he was able to look out of his back window and actually see the eye pass by. Wow. He was right on the inner eye wall, and which was a pretty scary episode in their family's life. But he's got total devastation of cotton. Started back picking peanuts this week, and they'll finish the peanut crop. It's kind of odd how some of it can survive and some of it, but the cotton is just total devastation. We have enormous losses in pecan, enormous losses in timber, and the timber forest products component of the problem is that there's so much to try to salvage, but so much that is not salvageable.
Right.
But if we allow this to stay on the forest floor, it has immediate impact on providing fuel for a potential forest fire.
Sure.
But also the near-term issues, we have to take away what's the possibility of infestation of southern pine beetle. It's that too is that possibility is looming, which would have devastating effects on the remainder of the forest. So Georgia's number one forest product producing state in the nation, and looks like those timber losses right now have already topped $1 billion. So $3 billion in total commodity loss so far. And I hope that number stops climbing. But
no, absolutely.
I would say this, Nathan. We had an excellent call with my colleagues around the southeast yesterday. We're putting together an agriculture economics team from North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, just to make sure that our economists are using the same models. It's time for the states to come together, use the same type of data collection, so that we can communicate clearly to Congress and meet the needs of what the president and vice president have both requested. Make sure we have an accurate count. This is not that no one wants hyperbole or blown up crying wolf. We're in rural communities have been devastated, and we've got to communicate clearly what those economic losses are, so that hopefully there'll be some help coming from the Congress.
Yeah, and speaking of the federal government and all, normally we see where some other states, particularly Florida, Louisiana, and all the coastal states, they deal with FEMA and whatnot a lot. In Georgia, I mean, how has this particular experience gone, and what kind of response are we getting from the president and those in Congress?
Word, it's so positive, and I was able to. We helped with the visits with the president and vice president this week, and I'm thankful I could tell him directly.
Right.
I mean, I had 2 calls from the White House before the wind stopped blowing.
Wow.
I mean, so
that's great.
How does it get any better? We've had enormous regular, transparent communication with this administration, unlike any that I've ever been around.
Yeah.
Certainly, I've been serving. I've had 2 administrations to deal with, and it's not even prior to the last 2 years, I had almost zero contact or communication or ever reach out from USDA, and of course now with Secretary Perdue, that's much different. But it's also the tone of this president, the tone of all the agencies. I mean, Governor Deal speaks of he had contacts from the Secretary of Homeland Security. Many of the secretaries of this cabinet were busy reaching out before we ever called them, and that's something we ought to be proud of.
Yeah.
And I was able to thank the president for that. But big job to do with FEMA, big job to do with USDA, and now we've got to tabulate what we think would, what is a figure that would be helpful? How do we do this responsibly?
Yeah.
I've got a bankers summit on Tuesday. This coming Tuesday with private lenders, Farm Credit System, USDA, and other individuals to see if we can look for a way to do some low-interest, long-term restructuring of some of the debt and see what tools might be available. Again, we've got to approach this in it's not about throwing money at things, but there will be some disaster response and relief that's going to be required of the government. I'm convinced of that. But we've got to make sure it's appropriate, transparent and responsible. I'm sure we get a bunch of smart people in the room. We can have some ideas that would be something to feed back. It's not just about trying to encourage our producers. I mean, the people speaking at these forums, whether it's the secretary or me or the president, or you get the microphone. But I've told our farm family that the answers don't come from the people that have the microphone. I think that we've got to all think thoughts we've never thought before, because this is a storm we've never seen before. It's damage we've never seen before. So it's going to require something that maybe is not quite traditional, but still would be appropriate in the eyes of the law. And I hope we can get some creative and smart people together to have some suitable ideas moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know you mentioned that the numbers, of course, are there, maybe not finalized, but we want to remind folks that agriculture is Georgia's #1 industry, right?
Sure. Well, most $73 billion annually in total economic impact, but we are the farm gate values of Georgia. What that means is, what does a farmer produce? What does a farmer produce and get paid for?
Right.
That's in the 12, give or take, the $12 billion range. We are already believing that impact is going to be $3 billion.
Wow.
So if those numbers were to hold true, that is going to have an immediately reflect that there's 25% of the farm value, the 25% of what farmers produce is simply blown away by Michael and destroyed. So,
Right.
Crop insurance helps in some cases.
Sure.
But it will be interesting to see what else from a disaster relief. Some of the ideas that might be helpful to these families to help us rebuilding process.
Right. Yeah, I think despite, we, like I said, we can look at numbers and all, but I read a story of Mr. Moss, I believe, from Camilla. He's a cotton farmer. Yeah, and he said maybe, hey, one more bad year and we're done. That was a quote.
Yeah.
I mean, is that the case with a lot of the farmers you see? What does that mean?
No, this was actually a bubble year for many of them anyway, and that's part of the. I guess in basic economics, or I remember in learning in the introductory agricultural economics, the term opportunity cost. You have when one thing is proposed and another something else is implemented, there may be an opportunity loss.
Right.
And so that opportunity cost is what the farmers were looking at here, because many times there was so much 14, 15, 16, 1,800 pound cotton.
Wow.
Meaning that's what they were they were looking for. Very, very much had the next 3 to 4 weeks we would have harvested a significant bumper crop, particularly when it comes to cotton.
Right.
But now we either have total devastation, or what we'll find out, many parts of the state in the zone of the storm will have 30, 40, 50% losses.
Wow.
But some will be 100% losses.
Yeah.
And so that opportunity is lost.
Sure.
And had we been able to get through this, it would have really helped farmers recover from the last couple of years, which have been tough just in general.
Yeah.
But now to have this burden on top is the credit crunch in rural Georgia is going to be real, and you can't help but believe that will have impacts to land prices and cropland rental prices, and so all of a sudden, these resources start evaporating from the rural parts of our state. It should cause all of us quite a bit of concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I'll paraphrase it, but like the old quote says, you may need a mechanic every now and then, a preacher every Sunday, but a farmer, you're going to need him 3 times a day.
That's exactly right.
So,
and it's a big world, it's a big world market, it's a big country. So, the one of the I started to say danger. I don't want to phrase it that way.
Sure.
One of the things that is a challenge for us is that we're all very busy. All of your listeners are busy. We all have families, and if we're living up here and have not really been affected, it's possible to here in just a couple 3 weeks be planning Thanksgiving dinner and go to the grocery store and really not see an impact. It's not like we're going to see empty shelves.
Sure.
We're not going to buy cotton dress shirts for folks for Christmas. We're not going to see an impact there because it is a big world. But there's in the state we all call home and that we all love so much, we've got to realize 30, 40, 50 counties of farm families that where a zero is going to be a too oftenly seen number when it comes to settling up this year. And so that's where the real family impact, the psychological impact out there.
Sure.
I've seen friends of mine that are as strong as I know, and they are broken.
Right.
They're broken for what they were hoping to happen, which was to be a very profitable year, and then turn that to zero over a matter of hours. And then just to see the damage that has a long-lasting psychological effect on you too. So
absolutely.
But Lord sovereign, that's what we've got to remind each other.
Right. Amen.
He has a plan. His grace is sufficient. His word says, so we trust in that, and I know that to be true personally and professionally. And pray for the president, pray for vice president, the secretary.
Sure.
All of us that have any may have a touch in this, that we seek the Lord's counsel and His wisdom, and with that, let's start reaching out to these families and do all we can to help them.
Yeah. Well, Commissioner, we appreciate that. We'll continue to ask our listeners to pray, and thanks for for joining us on the brief notice, and we'll be praying for you, sir, as you travel the state and continue to work. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Pop.
Have a good weekend.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. All right. That's it.
For live editions of Let's Get Growing, tune in Saturday mornings at 9 here on WRWH.
Back to more Let's Get Growing with Nathan Wilson.
All right, welcome back, folks. Before we go any further, I want to answer a question here that we had from Nathan. He's watching on Facebook Live, which I hope you'll join us next week at WRWH. Just search that on Facebook. He has an apple tree that's rooted from the original bucket into the yard. When should he transplant it? So if it's rooted out the bottom, that is very common, Nathan. It does happen. The time to do it would be pretty soon. You could probably go ahead and do it this weekend. It's a little rainy, but you could continue that in the next week. Just cut away the bucket, dig as much root system as you can, and plant it just like we always recommend, a wide hole, at least 3 times as wide as a root ball, but just as deep. So you can go ahead and do that now all the way through winter. Before we broke there for a commercial break, we did have the Commissioner of Agriculture speaking on the Hurricane Michael and the destruction. If you missed any of that conversation, feel free to go to Facebook, feel free to go to YouTube. Folks, the folks in South Georgia, they need your prayers. Middle South Georgia, the farmers there, like I mentioned when I went on the phone with the Commissioner, you You may need a mechanic every now and then. You may need a preacher every Sunday, but you need a farmer 3 times a day. And, we may not see increase in pricing. We may not see a decrease in availability on the market shelf because we do have a global economy, like the commissioner said. But the reality is the folks in South Georgia, they need your prayers. So please, if you would do that this week, continue to pray for the folks in South Georgia. Next week, folks, join us. We've got a recorded broadcast coming. I can't be in the studio, but it's going to be about the creepy side of the garden, deathly plants, and how plants aren't always our best friend. So hold on tight throughout the week. Give us a good week, and we'll see you this time, 9 o'clock next week on Let's Get Growing.
Thanks for joining us for today's Let's Get Growing program with Nathan Wilson. If you have a comment about today's program, you can reach out to Nathan by sending an email to grow@laniernursarygardens.com. Join us next Saturday for Let's Get Growing on Local News Radio 93.9 FM and AM 1350.